Welcome to the flipped lecture on the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T S Eliot. This is not a complete analysis of the poem. It is only a collection of some thoughts, and you are expected to read the poem and analyze it yourself. This is the standard copyright notice you will find in all my flipped lessons. The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock was Eliot's first major poem to be published in 1915, although Eliot began writing it in 1910. It has often been called the first masterpiece of modernism in English, as it represented a break with the immediate past, which was as radical and drastic as Wordsworth and Coleridge's break with the past in 1798, when they published lyrical ballads. However, Prufrock wasn't hailed as the great classic it is believed to be now. In the same year, the literary supplement of the London Times said that the fact that these things occurred to the mind of Mr. Eliot is surely of the very smallest importance to anyone, even to himself. They certainly have no relation to poetry. However, T S Eliot eventually went on to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948. Although Prufrock was hated in its early days, it is now regarded by many as a pioneer of modernist poetry. Let's look at the title. We expect a love song, but there is a clear ironic contrast between the romantic suggestion of a love song and the rather ordinary name J. Alfred Prufrock. The name actually comes from Prufrock Litho, which was a furniture company in Missouri where Eliot was born. There is more irony when we read the poem because it is most certainly not a love song. Yes, there are some elements often used in ballads and songs, such as rhyme, refrain, anaphora, parallelism, and incantatory tone, but I think we can agree that the poem is not a love song. Prufrock is unable to love. So, before we even begin, we are already confused and our expectations are vastly different to the reality we are given. And we haven't even got to the epigraph yet. The epigraph is from Canto 27 of the Inferno, which was written by the Italian poet Dante during the Renaissance. Translated, it means, "If I thought that my reply would be to someone who would ever return to earth, this flame would remain without further movement. But as no one has ever returned alive from this gulf, if what I hear is true, I can answer you with no fear of infamy." The epigraph is in the words of Guido, a man doomed to a prison of flame in hell for his treacherous advice on earth to Pope Boniface. Guido also tried to outsmart God by gaining forgiveness even before he had committed the sins. He tells the shame of his wicked life to Dante only because he believes that Dante will never return to earth to report what he says. There is a contrast between the serious epigraph and the lighter title, which does suggest that there will be a mixture of seriousness and flippancy throughout the poem, but there are also similarities between Prufrock and Guido. Both of them are in hell or versions of hell. Like Guido, Prufrock believes there is no way out from the metaphorical hell he finds himself in. The epigraph also suggests that the poem we are about to read may not actually be a poem about good people, but about people pretending to be good. We have already learned so much and haven't even read the poem yet. So, what is the poem about? It's written as an interior monologue of a man, presumably Prufrock. Do you remember what we learned about the stream of consciousness method employed by James Joyce and Virginia Woolf? According to Google, it is a literary style in which a character's thoughts, feelings, and reactions are depicted in a continuous flow uninterrupted by objective description or conventional dialogue. Prufrock is one of the earliest examples of stream of consciousness writing or interior monologue writing in poetry. It's somewhat of a variation on the dramatic monologue when we are able to see a character's thoughts and feelings on stage. Okay, it's time to dive into the actual poem. We do not know who the you and I are in the first line. The love song in the title seems to indicate it is a lady, but the epigraph suggests it may be a different type of person. It could also be the reader. We don't know yet. Some critics even suggest that it symbolizes a relationship between Prufrock and Eliot. All we know is that it is evening and they are walking through the streets in a disreputable part of the city. We don't even know which city, but we can take it as representing all modern industrialized cities. The question is not asked and the answer is not given. Did you notice the words oyster shells and sawdust restaurants? This world is an empty world, just like the oyster shells. Like the sawdust, it is not permanent and on the verge of collapsing. This world is temporary and ephemeral, and the setting appears to be rather unpopulated, perhaps even post-apocalyptic. But is the world actually this way, or is it Prufrock who is representing it in this manner? The metaphor of a cat is used to describe the fog. Note the use of phrases such as rubs its back, rubs its muzzle, sudden leap, and curled once about the house. Why has Eliot chosen a cat? Well, they keep to themselves, and unlike dogs, they are not very social creatures. Is Eliot actually comparing Prufrock to a cat? He has difficulty socializing with others, especially women, and the entire poem is about trying to bring himself to talk to one woman. Prufrock considers himself in love with this woman, but his fear of rejection prevents him from saying anything, and he ends up self-pityingly imagining a lonely old age. He senses that there is a more fulfilled life out there, but his inability to act and his insecurities prevent him from reaching out for it before it disappears. There is something tragic and pathetic in his failure. Thus, the fragmentation of the cat could, in this way, be emblematic of the fragmentation of Prufrock's own psyche. He is on the outside, looking in, rather like the cat. Let's look at the diction in Yellow Fog and Yellow Smoke, which reminds us of the clouded and confused state of Prufrock's own mind. The word yellow is traditionally symbolic of cowardice and faint-heartedness. Prufrock is, in essence, paralyzed by his fear. Look at the word lingered. It shows us that Prufrock is hesitant to act and actually say or do anything. It is because of this reluctance and this fear that Prufrock, like the cat, moves around but doesn't really achieve anything. We see Prufrock's indecision and his apathy. He says there will be time, but what will there be time for? He can't even seem to ask the overwhelming question, let alone have it answered. He is the epitome of procrastination. The repeated question, do I dare, increases the tension in the poem, but also shows Prufrock's fear of society. He is very familiar with this society, but finds it frivolous and dreary. His repetition of, into the room women come and go, talking of Michelangelo, and the coffee spoons and tea and cakes and ices he mentions, all reveal how dull and monotonous he finds it. These women are a living presence, but their discussion actually serves to deaden them. They are simply the women and serve to also set Prufrock apart. He is utterly removed from this fragmented society, where time seems to have slowed down. This is a society where manners and decorum stifle human interaction and where sexual attraction is never openly acknowledged. The persona seems to divide his time between this high society and the life of the poorer parts of the city, where the cheap bars are and where the prostitutes hang out. Prufrock is besieged by his emotions and tells himself that there is time, and so there is no need to rush into action. This is more procrastination. He is terrified of the unknown, and this weakens him. He does not dare disturb the universe. He is insecure, solitary, and passive. He is almost suspended in time. We also see that Prufrock can indeed speak and speak well, but he is hampered by his inhibition. He has seen the moment of his greatness flicker, but does not have the strength to force the moment to its crisis. In line 51, we have the famous coffee spoons line, which implies a solitary working life for which there is no other tool to measure. The persona is bound by routine and the mundane, which are the hallmarks of a bleak and depressing existence. He is pinned and wriggling on the wall and almost suspended in time because he cannot act. In line 62, we get another sense of the fragmentation of people when Prufrock talks of the arms which are braceleted and white and bare, or that lie along a table which are downed with light brown hair. Fragmentation, as you know, is a feature of modernism and modernist literature. Artists, poets, and writers believed that their creations should mirror the chaos of the world, which means their paintings, poems, and novels had to represent this fragmentation and chaos. In the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, we see a shattered and disintegrated society, and Prufrock is isolated and alienated. He reduces people to the sum of their fragmented parts, such as the arms in this stanza. We also see the torment of not being able to address the woman because the persona is afraid he will be tongue-tied and hesitant. His self-doubt and fear hold him back and make him feel more alienated. Indeed, the lonely men in shirt sleeves seem to represent Prufrock himself. Later, when he refers to Lazarus and Hamlet, we see that the persona is indeed educated and learned in history, literature, and religion, but he can still only ever fantasize about talking to her. In fact, it is so difficult that it is on par with squeezing the universe into a ball and is as complicated and as painful as Lazarus's death. This is a hyperbolic biblical allusion, and he is frozen by his paralysis. In fact, after this, Prufrock shows how anti-heroic he is. Even with his indecision, he is not Hamlet, a Shakespearean character whose hamartia was his indecision and ability to act. Notice the joke in line 111, which parodies Hamlet's famous to be or not to be soliloquy. The crab metaphor shows us a different side to Prufrock, his self-importance. He says he should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. We see his desire to be insignificant and inconsequential. By wanting to be like the crab, he suggests that he is right now significant, as logically one has to be important to wish being unimportant, and says he has the ability to disturb the universe. We get a sense of Prufrock's isolation. The silent seas indicate that Prufrock wants to escape and be alone, which again reminds us of his inability to actually do anything. We can almost see Prufrock trying to decide whether he should speak to the woman, and he is paralyzed by his thoughts. Even when he rehearses what he dares not say, he can't say it. If Prufrock were a crab, he would not have to worry about this. This metaphor reveals how much he overthinks everything, but wishes at the same time that he wasn't quite so paralyzed. Having given up, Prufrock feels himself prematurely aging, wearing rolled flannel trousers, which were out of fashion at the time and worn only by old men. He will part his hair behind and make other such trivial decisions. The persona is laughing at himself here. Then, there is a change in the last stanzas of the poem, from a tone of self-mockery showing Prufrock as the fool in an Elizabethan play to the language of romantic longing. He tries to escape from the real world where he has been defeated, and he dreams of mermaids. Yet he cannot avoid the reality and drowns. Compare the line, "Teach me to hear the mermaid singing," from a song by John Donne, the metaphysical poet. The seagulls are the sirens of mythology whose call pulled sailors to their doom. Lastly, who is the we who have lingered in the chambers of the sea? Why do we drown when we are woken by human voices? How is the last line of the poem deliberately anticlimactic? Modernism has introduced a number of prominent concepts into literature, such as fragmentation, despair, anxiety, alienation, a sense of meaningless, chaos, search for meaning and answer, the crisis of belief, loss of faith, and the invalidity of traditional and cultural norms. These can be found in the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and Eliot displays the problems and conditions of the modern individual. The persona searches for meaning and answer, and in doing so reveals his fragmented vision, analyzing the modern man's perception of life, norms, and faith. The structural and literary fragmentation of the poem, such as a regular use of enjambments, reflects the fragmentation of Prufrock's psyche as well as that of humanity at large. We see the mental struggles of the speaker, who is entrapped in despair, hopelessness, and anxiety, and who is desperately trying to overcome a powerful sense of meaninglessness. His perception of his surroundings is chaotic, disorderly, and disjointed. His realization of passing time, his aging, or his inability to relate to other people contribute to the sense of bleakness in the poem. The persona accepts these bitter facts about his inadequacy, which reveals a rather pessimistic outlook of his own life and life in general. He is the archetypal modern man, as he lives in the materialist modern world and experiences the despair and hopelessness that comes from his feeling of inadequacy and his incapability of connection, as well as his indecisiveness and anxiety over the future, resulting in a kind of psychological paralysis, a state of passivity or apathy. He searches for meaning but finds nothing. The flipped lesson on the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T S Eliot has now concluded. Please remember that this is not a complete analysis of the poem, and you are expected to analyze the poem yourselves and not rely on this mere collection of thoughts on the poem.